It was 2 albums, 4 singles, and that was it. It was like a film star who dies young. It was that kind of James Dean kind of thing where you kind of want more.
Yazoo, one of those acts whose magic has been released over a period of time. A lot of stuff 1982-83 would have fizzled away, but there's something about Yazoo that transcends even just nostalgia.
It was that shiny new pop of the time, but with her gutsy, bluesy, amazing voice over the top, giving it the bollock.
She was an incredible talent who'd come from nowhere and burst onto the scene. I don't think there were many British women singers around at that time who were that striking.
She was really a sort of R&B blues singer, and mixing that with electronics was sort of unheard of, and it was a great idea.
It was like a clash of 2 different things coming together that just worked really well. There was nothing that had been like that before.
It is a fantastic story that it was very brief, it was an unlikely partnership, it was incredibly successful, and yet oddly enough there was areas of it that shouldn't have been successful. All of that in the long run make them an interesting story.
The only person who had any sort of master plan was Vince, and he really had this idea of forming a band and being successful. And well, I think with me and Martin, and then when Dave came along, it was, you know, we just liked the idea of being in a band. So I don't think we ever thought we were going to be successful.
Vince was already a fairly self-contained individual, and I think he knew what he was doing. And I think that was always the case in the early days of Depeche. You know, Vince wasn't as naive.
And we struggled to get Depeche to where they were. It was really at last starting to happen. Daniel Miller rang me and said, I've got some news. It could be bad, it could be good. Vince is leaving. Little did I know it was actually going to develop into 2 separate careers and be very exciting.
Yeah, well, there's always conspiracies going on in everybody's minds, so yeah. I engineered the whole thing, yeah.
His sort of reason for leaving the band was along the lines of it's all getting too much sort of thing. You know, I always thought that maybe he thought he could do it by himself, you know, which he could.
I just thought that, you know, we'd been incredibly lucky, and it was unlikely I'd be so lucky again. I guess things weren't going in the direction that I'd hoped that they would go. We were a lot younger, so we weren't really into resolving issues and talking things through and expressing our feelings. Everybody just was a bit angry.
Whatever his reasons for wanting to leave and embark on another career, obviously in his own mind, it was the right thing to do. Depeche Mode went on to do the right thing. And it was interesting, as a parting shot, he actually offered Depeche Mode Only You as a song, which they declined.
Just after he'd left, he came along to, we saw him at the Mute offices, and he said, I've got this song, you know, and he sort of sang it, you know, doo-doo, doo-doo. And then me and Marty went, sounds like something else. You know, don't really like that. And anyway, it turned out to be Only You.
I seem to remember Vince ringing out the blue saying, I found this bird, her name's Alison, and we'll go form a band. She's cool.
Looking from a window above, it's like a story of love. Can you hear?
Only You is one of those songs that has really stood the test of time. It's as immediate now as it was when you first heard it. I'm not sure how that unlikely couple actually came together, but whatever the formula was, it really worked.
All I needed was the love you gave. All I needed for another day. And all I ever knew, only you.
The myth was fantastic, that it was an ad and that they never met, and Vince would respond stupidly to someone looking for a blues group. The fact that down the line it became clear that they'd met, they were at music school together, they were, you know, Alison was in the same class as members of Depeche Mode, rather shattered all of that idea that he could have searched the whole world for the kind of singer he wanted, and he ended up with a girl who probably was his next door neighbour.
All I needed was the love you gave. All I needed for another day. And all I ever knew.
advertised, I think, for a rootsy blues band in the Melody Maker. The same week that from what I remember, from what I was told, was Vince was looking for my number, and it was kind of there, you know. People assume that that's kind of completely where he got the idea from, but I think it was something that he was already thinking of doing.
She was in a punk band called The Vandals, and the guitarist from The Vandals was my best friend, Rob. So I saw her perform a few times. Then I saw her, she was in a blues band, and I saw her perform. Then I happened to notice she was advertising to start a new project.
I'd moved out of home and was staying at a friend's bedsit for a week, and that's as long as I lasted, because I had nowhere to park my motorbike. And I got a phone call from my parents saying that Vince had called and wanted to get hold of me. I called him back. He said he had a demo that he wanted me to sing on.
Wonder if you'll understand. It's just the touch of your hand behind a closed door.
I think she just came around my house. I played her the demo, and then she sang it. I had a little 4-track cassette tape recorder, and she sang it onto that.
And all I ever knew, only you.
I wasn't very experienced at that time dealing with artists, and it's always very difficult to sit in a room with a guy who's just about to play his new work. Anything you say sounds wrong somehow, because if you say, wow, that's fantastic, they go, oh, he's just bullshitting, just saying that. I kind of envisaged that I would be going back to doing a normal job once I left Depeche. If he didn't like it, then I was going to get a day job. And Vince called up and asked if he could pop by and play me something. I said, yeah, sure thing. And he came by and he played it to me, and I think I was just a bit thrown by it. So I just thought, well, that's it then. That's, you know, he doesn't like it, obviously. He's not jumping up and down or anything, so I'll go home. And then Rod Buckle, the publisher, came in with a couple of other guys who were the head of the publishing company, and they listened to the demo and they said, oh, this is really, really good. Then Daniel kind of gave it a second listen.
I can remember all that really quite vividly. Just called up, said, Daniel loves it, thinks we should record it. And that was it. You know, it's like, okay, we should record it.
This was all new ground for Alison. You know, she'd never been signed to a serious record company, if you like, and the Yazoo vehicle, for want of a better word, was undoubtedly rolling very quickly.
Right, and is everything okay for them to come over and do Top of the Pops next week if we get high enough?
As soon as we got beyond the initial difficulty of getting the record played, then the excitement started to build.
It went in the charts at 198. Now, today, you know, you just people who just cry, hang themselves, you know. It's like then, 198. 198 out, you know, all the records that are released. What an incredible thing that was, you know. And to have this record go up, you know, you get the record company call you, and it's gone up 20 places this week, it's gone up 30 places this week, and it's like, we're in the top 100. Fucking hell, top 100.
In my own mind, I've put it at number one. I've always thought that record was number one, so to now realise it only got to 2 is a bit of a shock. I thought we had a number 1 with that.
It was just serendipity, really. After that, he called up and said they reckon we should make an album. The turnaround was incredible. I mean, I've met so many people that said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you know, and Vince was really the first one that actually turned anything into anything, you know, that was really interesting. But I mean, we're talking about a week from the demo that we've been doing Only You, and then 2 weeks after that, we're starting an album. I remember going around to his flat, he got his drum machine, he goes, got any songs? He's kind of like that, oh yeah, I've got a song, yeah. Difficult. Nothing was torturous, you know. Every idea that we ever had got committed to tape, and everything bar one idea on that first album ended up on the album. And I remember very well going up to Blackwing in his Corona, and he said, we need a band name.
Alison came up with it, and I think it was a blues label in America.
Yazoo was just something that I'd kind of thought of because I'd started listening to a lot of blues music and wrote it on his window screen, and it looked all right, so we went with it.
Tears, but nothing can replace all of those
people expected colder, robotic type voices with electronics, and a lot of that album is sort of quite similar to what he was doing with Depeche, but what's different is this sort of soul, bluesy voice over the top of it.
It was that nice duality to the sort of electro-pop sound, but the sort of darker, broodier, more dramatic singing.
I wanted someone that could sing the songs with feeling and emotion. She was that person. At the time, you know, electronic music was being slagged for being cold and unemotional, and then Alison had this amazing emotional voice, so it went against the grain.
She brought a passion to, you know, an icy, you know, beat-driven sound, and nobody else was doing that kind of thing.
And the beautiful balance between Vince's, you know, electronic dreaming and this incredible voice that sounded like it did sound like a great Philly soul voice, you know, sort of Ann Peebles or something.
I was really proud of that record. You know, I thought that Alison sang it beautifully.
I sit and wait alone.
I will be done.
It had that sort of intriguing front cover. To me, that just makes you like it more because you want to step into this secret world and discover.
First of all, I went around looking for a place to be, a weird place upstairs at Eric's.
There is a picture, very small.
And then I hired in these mannequins.
Photograph I took some years ago.
It was an accidental moment that worked really well.
It shows a picture of the room I know. I sit and wait alone. In my room.
During the setup, I put the bodies on top of the table and then moved the chairs to find the right position, and all of a sudden there was the idea staring you right in the face.
The night, the room is lit by electric lights.
And I mean, that whole thing about upstairs at Eric's was, you know, where is Eric's and how do you get upstairs? What are they doing in there? What's going on?
That's where we recorded it. The studio was upstairs at this place.
This isn't heaven.
I stand alone and watch the clock.
And lead us not to temptation.
I only wait for it to stop. The doors are shut and all the windows locked.
I phoned this bloke at Blackwing Studio, I don't know who he was, and I said, there's no guitars, no amps, no drums, it's just a couple of synths. And he sounded really excited by it. The fact that he had that combination of being a musician and I wouldn't call him a boffin, he was just very interested in new technology, you know. So he hit it off with all of us on that basis, you know.
An easy person to get on with, just a great person to work with.
Vince and Eric, back where you were, sorry.
Back on your ass. Sweet down.
Well, Vince just got a Fairlight, which is probably the first commercially available sampler.
This is the science of the music. This is a waveform of a particular sound that we've got sampled in the Fairlight.
I remember feeling completely surprised that the simplest line, which I'd expect him to play freehand, he would feel far more comfortable programming and quantizing. Then it seemed like an odd thing to do. Now I completely recognise that as being a really important component of what it was that he was doing, the colours that he was creating with his programming.
To the lights, to the train setting in your head. Sunday night tears from youth clubs already dead. I'm glad we don't hear you anymore. I'm tired of fighting in your fashion war.
At the time, it didn't really take that long to record a record. Some of the tracks had 5 audio tracks on, and that's it. Yeah, things were much simpler then.
Wow, wow, goodbye 70s. Wow, wow, goodbye 70s.
The song style that he seemed to like seemed to be rather traditional, and it was the very fact that the tools that he used to put that on was what was kind of deviant, and that's what made a really interesting mix.
The song is the thing that determines the emotion. I mean, not the instrument that it's played on, I don't think.
When you start writing songs, everything sounds interesting, and you're discovering new ways of putting chords and words together all the time. So It's not like I had a planned idea of how I might sound in the future.
Well, I just really loved the sounds that Vince used. Lots of those kind of like arpeggiated swells and things.
Those early computers were not obviously about chord making, it was all about single lines. The only way that you could create a chord is instead of playing the 3 notes at one time is to play one after the other, describing the chord without literally playing it. And that's what Yazoo was all about, arpeggios and broken chords.
It's like very basic, but when you're listening to it through an amp in a club, it sounds really powerful. You know, and because it's quite minimal, all the sounds are really clear and crisp.
Looking at it lyrically and seeing some of Alison's contributions, there was a darker side there that maybe I didn't really appreciate at the time.
Looking back on Upstairs at Eric's, my favourite track has got to be Winter Kills. That's just an amazing track, and it's a great opportunity to hear Alison's vocal at its absolute best. It's fantastic.
She did the piano on that as well. She played the piano. She could play, see, I couldn't play.
Songs like Winter Kills that appeal to me the most, the really doomy, dramatic ones, because I was a goth.
Green in your love on bright days. You grew sun-blind. You thought me unkind. To remind you how winter kills.
Because Alison was a different kind of female and had different things going on in her hair and different things going on with her makeup, there would have been a lot of identification with that from those people that could see that as a precursor of goth.
She had spiky hair and eyeliner, and I just really liked her because she didn't look that different from me or my friends. I can imagine that she did have a hard time because she doesn't conform to what you're supposed to be, and she probably didn't conform to how you were supposed to behave. She probably just did exactly what she wanted, which made, which gives her appeal to her young female audience.
I think she thought it was quite an adventure, but then it did start to weigh on her.
I am someone that people have always been able to remark on, be it, in my physicality, by the fact that I've got a deep voice, by the fact that I'm not traditionally female in the way that you expected women to be at that time. People always opined about me, be it good or bad, and within 2 weeks I'd gone from being this kind of like dark horse from Basildon to suddenly having everyone be interested in what I was saying, what I was doing, what music I was making, what I had to say for myself, the way I presented myself, and nobody to advise me. And I sort of just didn't have any guard up at all. When I went on Top of the Pops, I had no money to buy clothes with. I had no thought about how I should present myself. I didn't even think what I should do with my feet the very first time I went on stage. It's like, that's how ridiculous it was. I didn't have any grounding at all. My first performance was on television.
Up next, the people, a duo who've made 2 of the best singles of the year so far. Yazoo!
Top of the Pops was huge. 20 million people watched it at that time. It wasn't the only TV show, but it was by far the biggest and by far the most influential. And if you got Top of the Pops, you had a hit record, basically.
You only get Top of the Pops on the basis that they had, say, 12 slots in the show, and they worked from number 1 working down, and certain rules kicked in. So the number 1 would be on the show. Number 2 was on last week, so it can't be on. You can't be on 2 weeks running as your number 1. Number 3 is going down, so that's out. Number 4, they're not available. Number 5 is up. Yes, they can be on the show. So it kind of worked by default, getting down the show. And if you got to, say, number 47, and you got Top of the Pops, you're the 12th act on the show, and it's Yazoo, it's like, yes, we're on our way.
If you went in the top 75, all of a sudden you had huge orders from all the big record shops, the chains, and you had to find the records to fill the orders.
I remember getting a call from the girl in the office at Mute going, oh yeah, we sold 97,000 today. Did you? 97,000 today? That's just such Mickey Mouse numbers.
We shipped 300,000 the first week, which was just like, we just couldn't believe it. And again, it was the basics of the thing, getting the records pressed and out to the shops, which was the immediate challenge. I mean, I didn't think about the next album at that point. I was just like thinking about the next day and can we get the records out?
You know, nowadays, even up to fairly recently, if a record goes in the charts, then pretty much the next week it goes out. You know, actually going up a stage, but that went up over a number of weeks. It kept on going up and up, so it was very satisfying.
Fucking hell, Germany wants them, France wants them, America wants them. Situation had become a bit of an underground club hit in America, in the pre-house New York club scene, you know. We licensed it to Sire, and they said, you know, Francois Kevorkian want to do a mix, and the concept of remix at that time was like totally alien to us, you know. We thought, well, we don't have somebody else fucking with our music, you know. And he did the mix. We said, okay, try that and we'll see if we like it. And Vince hated it.
I didn't like it at all because I felt that it was getting away from what we'd originally recorded, which is, it turns out that's what remixes are. I didn't know that at the time.
But for whatever reason, we said, okay, you can put it out. And of course, it became massive. Famous club in New York called Paradise Garage, which kind of was the beginning of the New York dance scene, and they were booked to play it. It was the first club I've ever been to where they didn't sell alcohol because it was illegal and everybody was on drugs, so it didn't matter.
That was when I started to appreciate that maybe, you know, dance music was a good thing to do in America.
As there weren't that many live shows, there weren't that many I remember, but I do remember standing on the stage of the Dominion with Vince, and I think we had the BBC recording that for future broadcast. And I remember, you know, BBC engineers running around, thousands of miles of cables trunked everywhere, and Vince just stood there and looked at the whole thing, and he said, you know, with modern technology and a fairlight, I could be at home. Why do I need to be here? I mean, she could be on stage singing, I could play it, you know, just be at home. Easy. And I thought, Vince is really not into this. I can see already we're back to Depeche, I hate touring, I don't want to do this.
By the time we'd finished the album, the writing was already on the wall between Vince and me. I tried to make it otherwise for a while, but Vince at that time was a man who's, once his mind was made up, there was no changing, as I'm sure Depeche felt, you know, earlier than I did.
It was a personality thing, you know. We failed to talk to each other and to iron stuff out.
Vince was very English in that way that when he was feeling something, he would digest it and you wouldn't really know what was going on. But I grew up with difficult men, they didn't intimidate me. So his being less than effusive was not something that was enough to deter me. Had I had a different character at the time, I think there would have been less of a problem. But I did come from quite a scrapping family. It didn't occur to me that effing and blinding and shaking your fist would upset anyone because it's like what I was used to.
In my mind, and probably in hers, I'm sure that whole thing gets exaggerated and gets to a point where you can't see how this thing will resolve. It can only resolve in us ending the band.
It wasn't destined to last because what made them a contradiction and then initially made them work would eventually take over. The contradictions would take over.
I think it was at the beginning of the making of the album, to be honest, when I realised there's something going on that they weren't clicking and they weren't really in the studio together.
No, we pretty much didn't record together at all. You know, I would do the track and during the day, I think, and then Alison would come in the evening and do the singing.
You know, we were really estranged at that time. But what I would say that early on in the day is that I didn't feel any pressure because I just had the arrogance of successful youth in that anything that we did do, as far as I was concerned, was going to be good.
It was kind of like a clash of egos or something. But I think without that, they wouldn't have had Yazoo wouldn't have existed, because I think it's some kind of energy that they captured, which was the conflict between the two of them.
My feeling about the second album, which seemed confirmed when I played it again recently and hadn't heard it for a while, is that it seems almost like a lot of goodbye.
Move along, you're in my way. Made my mind up now to stay. It don't matter what you do. I've had enough of you. You can talk about the good times. I can't just remember bad times. There ain't nothing left for saying. There's no way that I'll be staying. Tell me to remember when I told you that I'd never walk away. Hey baby, don't walk away from love.
And it's one of the things I loved about Yazoo, was that there was this underlying sense of the man and the woman coming together, having a relationship, and then it falling apart. And that seemed to be the soundtrack to that arrangement, that relationship, that second album.
You and me both. It was just like that. It's sardonic, yeah.
I remember really looking forward to that record coming out, and that the Dalmatians fighting on the front cover was another brilliant sort of what's going to be in this.
I love the artwork on that record. We didn't have a concept, so someone came along with that idea. I think Alison was more involved, actually.
I remember being sent down to see this photographer for the album sleeve, and I remember I was in a black mood, and him showing me his portfolio, about just showing me what kind of pictures he could take, and as a part of the portfolio was the picture of the two dogs snarling, and I said, we'll have that, and I left.
I can imagine that's the truth.
I never thought about that.
'Cause we're the happy, happy people. The happy, happy people. Yeah, we're the happy, happy people. The happy, happy people.
I think that the press got wind of the fact that it was wound up as the album was released. That's what I seem to remember happening.
I guess there's always a sense of disappointment when you get an album and you're immediately told it's the last album and it's all over. And I got in a wider sense that there was now a big audience for Yazoo, and that it was an odd way to treat them. Now, we were quite used to those ways of treating an audience, because in a way at the time the audience wasn't necessarily the most important thing. It was the ideas and the art and the sonic invention. But it did seem a peculiar way to say goodbye.
I suppose there's a tinge of, well, it's really great, but we know that there's not going to be another one. Obviously that's sad, but at that point, as I said, like, at that time especially, we didn't think too much about the future, because the present was so consuming,
We'd been unbelievably successful, and I did have a sense of kind of what a great way to end it, massive album. We got to number one, so we'd done it.
Back in the early 80s, it really was a big deal to have a number one in the singles or album chart. In particular, the album chart, because albums were selling in vast quantities, and to have a number one album meant that you really were quite special, that you really had cracked it, and that people, generally speaking, loved you. It's not like now where people can access music in so many ways. Album sales are diminished to a point where you wonder how meaningful it really is. But in those days, a chart like that would have been a snapshot as to kind of popular culture and what people genuinely liked or disliked. And if they liked you, you were made number one, and they were loved.
Towards the end of the recording, Alison played Nobody's Diary, and we recorded it, and it immediately stood out to be the track that should be released as a single.
If I wait for just a second more, I'll forget what I came here for.
I guess I hoped a little bit that it would make Alison feel a little better, because it was, her track and her song. That was certainly a conscious thought of mine.
But as I open my lips, all my words slip away.
It was reported that Yazoo split up because I wanted to go and be a solo singer, which is the biggest load of tush ever.
I can't believe you want to turn the page.
So to say, was there any feeling of we did it too quickly, or I never wanted to do it in the first place?
And move your life onto another stage.
I don't know if Vince ever felt that it was the wrong move. I suspect not.
You can change the chapter, you can change the book, but the story remains the same if you take a look.
It seemed perverse at best, but in hindsight, very indie and very uncompromising to break it all up at the moment when you really could have taken on the world.
For the time we've had, I don't want to be a page in your diary.
think because they had such a short career that people, remember them very fondly for that. They never blew it, really.
I, at any point in the last 25 years, would have worked with Vince again, because I truly believe that with him, I was gifted something that I have not found since. I know what I brought to Yazoo, and I know what I brought to Yazoo was more than a voice, but I also know that had it not been for Vince, there would have been no deal on the table, there would have been no recording career. I have huge gratitude and warmth towards him. About a year ago, I contacted Vince and said, look, it's come up to 25 years, how do you fancy doing a gig? It was very lovely and said, the idea was exciting, but ultimately, he was in a committed musical relationship and, and I understand that. It's easier for me to travel because I don't have that. So it was like, well, I got that completely and, no hard feeling.
We were on tour last year for quite a while and I said to Vince, well, I would like to have a couple of years off from Eurasia, because it's been a long time, 21 years, And then he said, oh, well, there's talk of Yazoo reforming and going on tour. I said, Vince, you've got to do it.
Perhaps if I held you, I could win again.
I got a phone call a couple of months ago saying Vince has had a change of heart and he fancies doing it, which is like, how brilliant. I'm actually going to get a chance to be able to sing this stuff again with a voice that is so much stronger than it used to be and with an attitude that's so much more positive than it used to be. He's agreed to drop everything by a semitone, which is kind of very useful. And so yeah, we're going to do some Yazoo gigs.
Everyone's getting back together again, aren't they? I mean, look, we've got Led Zeppelin, the Spice Girls. It's got to be Yazoo.
I don't think they're the type to join a kind of nostalgia tour for the sake of it. I think they probably have some genuinely good musical reasons for doing that.
They never really peaked as a live act. They were only just kind of growing as a live act when they stopped. I think it's going to be really great, actually.
There was a kind of love for Yazoo, I think, that never fully got explored or explained. And I suppose it's the sense of getting some kind of climax that we never quite got to, because Vince or whoever, whatever, pulled it apart just at the moment when we were fully going to embrace it. So it's a nice, this one is a nice gift to us rather than a terrible nostalgic cash-in.
Write me a